Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Shelf Book Talk with Book Lovers. I'm Elizabeth Nelson here with Kay Johnson. And Kay, what have you been reading?
I am super excited. I discovered a new author that I had never heard of. You know how excited I get.
It's fun to find new
And
authors.
this was not a Kindle Unlimited. This was like lay money down. But it popped up on my Facebook feed, and it's about an Israeli detective.
Okay.
His name's Adam Lapid, L-A-P-I-D.
Okay.
And they're described as historical novels because they're set in the late 40s in Israel. And Israel's just become a state.
Okay.
And what makes Adam so interesting is he's a survivor of Auschwitz.
Oh, okay.
And so once he was liberated from Auschwitz and recovered his health, he became a Nazi hunter. And he just went to Germany and just
Took care of business.
And out of that business, he has a revolver and a switchblade that belonged to a couple of these Nazis that he keeps in a box hidden underneath a false floor and so on. But there's 7 books, and there's one called The Auschwitz Detective, which is a prequel, which I did not read because sometimes they can get too dark. But the other 6 are not dark, and Jonathan Dunsky is the author, and he lives in Israel.
Okay.
And but they are so good because Adam, is transitioning from the mindset of a victim to being a detective, private detective, and then he has his own ideas of justice.
Yeah.
And so he, doesn't really think it's a bad idea to take out the bad guy and stuff. And so, but they're really, really good. They are so good that I paid $8 a piece for them. And I bought 6 of them.
Oh, wow.
And I'm waiting I signed up to follow the author, Jonathan Dunsky. So he sent me an email saying that he was working on number 8.
Well, good.
So I highly these are really good books. And the mysteries become more and more convoluted as you go through the series.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you think it's all settled, and then it's not.
Something else happens. Interesting.
So they're really, really good.
Okay.
So what have you been reading, Elizabeth?
Well, I was going through my Kindle, and I found a Christmas-themed book that I had missed. So I finished that. And it's called 'Tis the Season for Revenge by Morgan Elizabeth. And this is it's a rom-com. It's a basic, so the main character's name is Abby. And for the last 4 years, she's been dating Richard Bartholomew Benson III, who is just as pretentious as his name tells us. And she's pretty sure that they're going to get engaged, and he comes to pick her up for his company's Halloween party and dumps her.
So much for that idea.
And so it's one of those things where she had changed a lot and she'd done a lot for him. And as she's hanging out with her friends, because you have a breakup, you call your friends and say, "Come save me." And so as they're trying to make each other feel better, her one friend's signing her up on a dating app, and her other friend is realizing that they need to figure out ways to get back at Richard. Well,
those are fine friends.
Yes, they are. And so the one friend that's on the dating app, they're scrolling, and they realize that his boss is on this dating app. And so she decides that she is going to date the boss so she can go to the company Christmas party and show him what he's missing. Not only that, but they are also throughout the whole book pranking Richard because she did everything for him. Like she was she thought he was a girlfriend, but he used her like a personal assistant without paying her. So she still has the key to his car. So they put glitter in all of the vents. And then what else did they do? They put his phone number on keys and then distribute them around the city. So people are calling saying, "I found this key."
Thinking that they won a prize or something.
They call his tailor and change the size of his clothes. So all of his clothes are too small. And it's just, so there's all this stuff they're messing with him. And then she is kind of coming back into her own. And then, of course, there's the love side with meeting the boss. And the boss, she always had thought the boss was kind of a jerk, and she finds out he's not. because she always heard about it from
The
the
boyfriend.
So it was a nice, easy read. I really liked it.
I think it sounds good. I really
It
like
was.
the idea of glitter and
Oh,
the.
it was. They're just. You can't, and then you can't even feel bad. But she's dating the boss, and she'll call him and be like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, some guy here at the office, his girlfriend dumped him, and she gave his number out for something." And so she can keep track as everything is
Because
happening
the
to him
boyfriend's-
because the boss is telling her. So, but I mean, there were times where you just had to laugh out loud because you would really. It's kind of fun, but I really did enjoy it. It was I'm in a group on Facebook for people for like a book club, and so they did like a buddy read for a month, and this was the first one we did. So yeah, it was fun.
I
But-
just know how terrible glitter is.
I know, and I thought it was pretty fun. I was like, dude, I want to be friends with these ladies.
Yeah, really.
What else have you been reading?
Well, I was particularly pleased when you read Amy Come Home
I
by
did.
Barbara Michaels. And
Yes.
if you have not read Amy Come Home by Barbara Michaels, I highly recommend it. I mean, I probably read it 40 years ago the first time. And
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was just enough. I liked it because it was like your classic ghost story, like
Yeah.
your gothic little mystery thriller.
but it reads so well, and the characters are
Yes.
so interesting, and
And there's actually a second book in
Okay.
that, and like this. So like the series is called the Georgetown series, and the
Okay.
second book is called Shattered Silk.
okay.
And so the second book, which I finished, I stayed up late because I wanted to finish it before we came here and filmed this. But so the second book takes place in the same house, except it's several years later, and Ruth, who owned the house in the first book, her other niece has come to stay with her because her marriage fell apart.
Sarah's sister.
Sarah's sister, Karen,
Okay.
who is not a Karen, but Karen comes to stay, and Ruth and Pat are going off to somewhere in Africa for something he's doing. And so she's going to be staying there at Ruth's house, and because she left her husband. Her husband was a real jerk and decided, again, he just didn't want her. And so instead of just staying there after he decided they were done, she just went to the house, packed a box of her stuff, and drove to Georgetown and stayed with Ruth and Pat. And so she's also filling in for a friend who owns a vintage shop, and friend in quotes. And so Ruth has all kinds of old clothes, vintage clothes in the attic, and so she starts going through that stuff, and then Pat finds out and so hooks her up with his mother, who is really eccentric.
Yes.
And Karen decides she's going to open her own vintage store.
Okay.
And so she's going around to all these Mrs. McDougal's house, and Mrs. McDougal also decides that she's going to go visit Pat
In Africa.
in Africa. And she's like 96 years old, and so her and her maid, who I think is like, well, not the maid is supposed to go with too, and she's in like her 70s. And then there's some like college age kid who's a
going with
family
them?
friend who's going to take her and make sure she gets there safe.
So taking these two,
Yes. But so she's going around.
does Pat know she's coming?
No.
Of course
She gets a telegram that says, "I'll never forgive you for this, and it's all your fault," or something. And he says, "But Ruth says she's happy." But yeah, so she's collecting all of this stuff, and then she comes home one night from collecting stuff, and she's attacked in the house, and the clothes are strewn all over the place, and
Ooh.
everything's wrecked, and just weird kind of stuff starts happening where stuff is getting moved, and there's someone outside in the garden, and so it's trying to figure out what's going on in the house this time. But it's kind of fun because there are things that play back to Amy Come Home
Oh, okay.
in the second book. So somebody's written like a book with like legends and murders, and it's close enough that like it borders on like scandal stories, but
Okay.
it's close enough that they don't name any names. So like
Okay.
and nobody knows who the author is.
Ah.
But at one point in the book, it talks about what happened at the end of Amy Come Home, because
Okay.
everybody keeps saying, "Did you notice your aunt's house is in the book?" And she's like, "I didn't find it anywhere," which means that obviously nobody outside of the people in Amy Come Home knows what happened in
Yes.
Amy Come Home. And there is a third book in like the Georgetown series, which is called Stitches in Time.
Okay.
But I tried to start that one and I couldn't do it. It boiled down to people are influenced by an evil quilt,
Okay.
which was a little too much for even me. So I tried to start it and that one just went back to the library. And I also didn't realize that Barbara Michaels is Elizabeth Peters.
Yeah, Peters. I was just going to say this. So if you're a fan of Vicki Bliss or Peabody, Elizabeth? No.
No, Amelia Peabody.
Amelia Peabody. They're the same author. And I think she actually wrote under other names too. She was an archaeologist by trade. I mean, by training.
Yeah, but I didn't even realize that until the Amy Come Home book you lent me. On the cover, it says Elizabeth Peters writing as Barbara Michaels. And it kind of makes you, I'm sure it's a lot more prevalent for authors to have pen names than we realize.
Yeah, I think that's, well, I think Stephen King wrote under a pen name initially when he started writing, and then when he hit the big time, he released all those books he'd written under another name.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. And some authors are kind of tongue-in-cheek about it, because I remember Nora Roberts also writes as J.D. Robb.
Oh,
but
yes.
if you look in the back of the J.D. Robb books, it says J.D. Robb shares a house and a husband and children with Nora Roberts. So she's kind of makes fun of it, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah, they were good. And they don't write books like those anymore. They try, but they can't. There's enough of a storyline, but they still leave enough to the imagination.
Yeah, and I think they really do a great job because you feel like you're in that Georgetown house.
Yes.
I mean, you feel the atmosphere and the
cold and and all the oppression and everything. And also with Shattered Silk, Mrs. McDougal has a dog named Alexander who is just hateful. He is constantly always biting people. Like every time they open the door, somebody yells, "Grab Alexander, grab the dog."
That's really funny. I'm going to have to read that.
Yeah.
You know, I think I did read it like 1,000 years ago, but...
Well, it was really funny because Mom had read it, and she was like, well, there's something, they find a box with a dress in it that's covered in blood. And I got like halfway through, and she's like, did they find the box? And I said, I don't know anything about a box. And I had to go back and reread it. I did figure it out, but it was like... And she's like, well, maybe I'm thinking of a different book. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. But she's like, no, I'm pretty sure it's that one. But it was interesting the way they get the name for the book Shattered Silk is when silk gets so old to a point where you can't repair it. If you wash it, it just breaks apart. Oh. And so it looks like it shatters, which is where the name came in.
Oh, that's interesting.
But yeah. So yeah, it was cool.
I think that Barbara Michaels / Elizabeth Peters is a fabulous writer because she has a way of really bringing the reader into the scene.
Yes.
Because in Amy Come Home, you can almost smell the lilacs on that long forgotten spring night.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just, I really encourage, if you haven't read it and you're looking for a good book, Amy Come Home is a really good book. And it's available at the library, you can download it. I mean, it's like everywhere. So
yeah,
it's one of my very favorites.
What else have I read? I went for a nonfiction.
Ooh.
So I have this mild obsession with cults. I like to read about cults and see people, not like, I would like to say that I would never be in a cult because I would hope I would be smart enough, but most people that fall into cults are smart people, which is kind of terrifying when you think about it. When people come back and start talking about things. But one of the ones I always read about whenever anything comes out is Scientology, because it's so out there with it. And so a guy named Mike Rinder, his book, A Billion Years, My Escape from a Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology came out. And he was like one of like the big people, like way high up. And he left, and he now had a TV series, and he does a podcast with Leah Remini.
Oh, okay.
She
got out too.
Yep, she got out too. Her book Troublemaker is really good too. But Leah Remini has a really, really foul mouth.
Oh.
So she does like her F-bombs and all of that too. So be warned, but Troublemaker is her book, which is really good also. But so it talks about, so the book starts with Mike's family getting into Scientology in Australia, and it follows him up the rise, and then when everything kind of came crash down to when he left. And it was interesting. Some of the stuff, because I've watched a lot of documentaries about it, and I've watched the show. I think the show was called The Aftermath.
Okay.
It was on A&E, and I think it's on Netflix now. But there's 3 different seasons, and though the TV series focuses on what happened to people when they left. And it focused mostly, they got the idea for the TV series because another lady who had left, her mother had stayed in Scientology and she was dying.
Okay.
And she decided she wanted to see her daughter. And because when you leave, you have to separate and you can't talk to the people because they're suppressive people and they're bad for you. And so they had reconnected and they asked Leah to come in, and they did an interview with this woman before she died, and it talked about everything that it had destroyed, because it destroys families when this happens. And so they got the idea that, well, if this happened to this family, obviously there's more stories out there.
Yeah.
And so, so they have those stories that are being told, and then in between, they're constantly being followed by private eyes and people trying to get them. And so there's all kinds of disclaimers for Scientology on the episodes. But his book was really interesting, and it's he has a letter in the beginning that's kind of heartbreaking because his kids are still in it and they were raised in it, so they don't talk to him. And so he has an open letter to his kids, hoping that like someday they'll read the book. And that's kind of sad, but
yeah,
but it's a crazy, but it's just one of my things. I have to, if the new book comes out about Scientology, I got to read about it.
That's okay. We all have our things.
We do, but I enjoyed it. Quick read. Again, my husband thinks I'm crazy too when I read those. So
you're the Minnesota expert on Scientology.
I hope. I don't know about an expert, but I will read it.
Well, I have to say that I was terribly disappointed in Louise Penny's latest book.
Oh, no.
A World of Curiosities. And it came out before Christmas.
Okay.
And it is a dark, dark, dark story.
Okay.
And I paid money for that dark,
dark story.
And people seem to love it, which really raises questions in my mind. But I just told Louise Penny that she could kiss me goodbye. I'm not ever buying another book of hers or reading another one. But just to give you a hint, it's about child pornography. And so, and it came out before Christmas. Hello? Yeah, no, because no.
Yeah.
I have 3 great nephews, and no.
Yeah.
No.
I know, I agree. Some of the stuff when it comes to that is harder to read. Like there are some books that I read before kids that I don't think if I had read them, if I had started them after I had the kids, no, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, I wouldn't. I started reading this thinking it was going to be good because Gamache is in it and the whole gang, and he was as horrified as I was. So yeah. So anyway, if you haven't read it, and you like to avoid dark subjects, avoid this book. Okay. But if you're a Louise Penny fan, you may feel that you want to read it. And if you do, I'd like to know what you think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
And stuff. So
another one that I read a book. It was on the Reese Witherspoon book club, which sometimes those are hit or miss. But this one was called Wrong Place, Wrong Time.
Okay.
And it's by Gillian McAllister. And Becca read this one too for her book. Well, she listened to the audiobook while she was up with John many times. But so the whole premise of this book is at the start of the book, the main character, I can't remember what her name is, and it's not going to tell me obviously in this because that would be too easy. Anyway, so the main character, she's waiting for her son to come home. And it's really late at night, and her husband's going to bed, and she's standing looking out the window, and she sees her son coming towards the house, and there's another man walking parallel, and she doesn't recognize who the man is, and seemingly without knowing who the man is to her son, who has just turned 18, stabs him.
The son stabs him.
The son stabs this seemingly random man on the street and kills him.
I wonder if I read that book.
And it just came out a little
Okay, there was
recently.
one similar to that.
Yeah. So they go to they try to go to the police station and they can't get anything find anything out. And so she and her husband go home, go to bed. She wakes up the next morning, and it is the day before the murder. She's gone back in time a day. And so basically the whole part of the book is she starts going back in time further and further. And every time she goes further back, wherever she is, it's something that connects to why this murder happened. And so it's her trying to figure out how everything is connected and what she can do
to change it.
So I mean, it was really interesting. I've never had a book that, I mean, you know, you have people that travel back in time all the time in books, but this was a different way to do it. And basically every time she went to sleep, she didn't know how much farther back she would be or if it would be another day.
So does she save him?
There's a happy ending, yes.
Okay.
I don't want to give it away, but there are several twists. And it was interesting. The twist at the end, I didn't see that was going to be what it was. So it was good. I liked it.
The book I read years ago was about mom and dad, and their son kills somebody. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think it was maybe a stalker of a girlfriend, or I don't know, something. But it's all about the family coming to terms with having a murderer in the family and how did this happen?
Yeah.
And the son never denies doing it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, you know, as she goes back, she gets younger, her son is getting younger, and, you know, she starts to see, you know, it kind of gives you, and I, as a mother of a son, you know, I have 2 sons, but with that, looking at how she could kind of look back and re-look over her relationship with her kid too, it kind of
enlightening.
Hits you right here, like, oh, I don't want this to happen, or some different things like that. So, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't sure, like I was like a third of the way through the book, and I was like, I don't really know if this is for me. And then Becca kept telling me, it gets better, just stick it out. And I'm trying not to be the person that reads the book they don't like. So
I don't do that.
I know you don't, but I'm a completionist. I have always been a completionist.
That's true. Well, I have to say that I am reading Georgette Heyer is long gone. And these are books she wrote, I think, from like 1921 to 1950. But she's typically best known for Regency romances.
Okay.
But she wrote 12 mysteries.
Okay. And
they're called the Country House Mysteries.
Do they take place in the English countryside?
They do! And some of the titles are Footsteps in the Dark, The Unfinished Clue, Death in the Stocks. Right now I'm reading Double Deal or something. It's about 2 people killed in the same manner during bridge. So that's sort of interesting.
It's a pretty lethal card game there.
Yes.
Gosh.
But the one book that I really recommend is Footsteps in the Dark. And then that's a fun book because it's 2 couples who buy a house in the country. And the women, of course, see it through rose-colored glasses. And, like, she's telling her husband about the wonderful grass tennis court, and he's saying he needs a tractor, bale, to bale the hay because the grass is so high. But it's really great because they hear noises, you know, and they're trying to figure out, because people have said it's haunted, and it is haunted, but not by who you think.
Okay.
But that's a really, really good one. And what I like about them is I do like the older mysteries because it's a more genteel time. People are, well, they're just as nasty as ever, but they dress better and they are more polite and all these kinds of things. And so if you're looking for some good reads, Georgette Heyer, Country House Mysteries, 12 books in the series, and they've been reissued on Amazon.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I get Kindle Unlimited, and then I also subscribe to Scribd.
Okay.
And that's like Amazon.
Okay.
But all the Georgette Heyer books are available free. They're part of the subscription.
Oh, nice.
So when I found those, it was like, wow, I actually paid money for some of these. So anyway, now I can read them all free, which makes me really happy.
So another one that I read, it's by Lisa K. Adams. And the name of this book is The Bromance Book Club.
Okay.
So this story follows a baseball player named Gavin, and his marriage to his wife Thea is in trouble. And she's basically kicked him out of the house, and he's miserable and wants her back. And while he's staying at this apartment, a bunch of guys on his team show up and inform him that they're going to save his marriage because something, he won't say what happened, just that it fell apart, and they're going to help him.
This sounds like a really bad idea.
And they are all part of a book club, and they read Regency romance novels and learn to be better men and take care of the women by what they can learn from reading these books that women like so much.
That's actually a pretty good premise.
And it's so funny because there are throughout the book that he's reading is inserted. There are chapters, and I listened to the audiobook, and so you have the chapters where it's the voice of Gavin, where he's reading, and then it'll get to the part where it's I got to double check what the name of the book they're reading is because it's a really funny name. It's I'm not gonna be able to find it. Courting the Countess is the name of the book that they're reading, and it'll go to somebody else, and it's a real sort of a guy talking like this on the audiobook. You know, it's real, just over the top, real. But it's funny because all these guys are like that are in this book club are like baseball players, or there's a guy that's on a hockey team who's real Russian,
like real men.
Yes, and they're just talking about how did you read the book, and they're giving them like they're giving him tips how to flirt with his wife, and he was like. He went over and told her he wanted to come back, and he kissed her, and then he tells them this, and they're like, "You kissed? You can't kiss her!" And they're just so upset with how he's doing things, and
is he not doing it by the book?
He's not doing it. He's doing it wrong. They're like, that. What did they say? That's grand gesture stuff. You're not at the grand gesture point yet. And it's like there's a point where he's home. All the guys are over with him and his daughters, and they're all bringing him books, and because he gets to go back home, and the wife comes home, and you see all the guys are suddenly throwing all the books in boxes, and they're throwing them in the guest room, so she can't find them, and it's just funny. It's also, this is the first one in a series. There are 5 in the series. So the first one is the Bromance Book Club, and then there's Undercover Bromance, Crazy Stupid Bromance, Isn't It Bromantic, and A Very Merry Bromance. So I've just started them, but it's a rom-com, but it was really it was just fun, and I liked the audiobook aspect because of that voice back. It was so funny, but it was kind of the thing that was interesting because the book they were reading, it did play into it kind of mirrored what he was going through. So it did. And it's a romantic
Was he a member
comedy.
of this book club to begin with?
No, he wasn't. He didn't. They come up and they're like, we read these books, and he's like, you've got to be kidding me. And they're all comparing it. It's just,
Do they find the books help them?
They do, yes. And the one guy that started it, he started it because he and his wife were having problems, and then just more guys all got together and they help each other, and it's just so funny. They're just. It just made me laugh. I have
to read this.
They were so fun. And there's times where like he's fighting with his wife and he can hear the protagonist from the book in his head. And so it's like calling him names and telling him, well, you screwed that up. And it's just
Does
funny.
she ever find out?
Yes, it does all come out in the end.
And how does she take this?
It all works out as they always do in romance books, happy endings. But it was just really funny, and I enjoyed it. I was listening to it in my headphones at work, and I think I giggled out loud. But we have reached the end of our time.
Oh wow! What was the name of it again?
The name of that one was called The Bromance Book Club by Lisa K. Adams. And on that note, we're going to say goodbye this week. If you've read anything or want us to read anything, reach out to us on Facebook or our email at offtheshelfbooktalk@gmail.com, and we will see you next time.